So
I've
we
got
ready?
a really good shot, Tom, of your right ear. There we go. Okay.
What an ear it is. He's got an ear for podcast.
Compared to my
ready?
ears, his ear's a starter ear.
Oh, stop.
He hasn't graduated
Hey, everybody, it's your main man, Rob. Welcome to the broadcast. From the showroom to the podcast studio, everything in health and wellness right here. Today, I'm joined by two of my most esteemed colleagues, two great guests, two great guys, Dr. Thomas Seager, professor at Arizona State University. Good afternoon, Tom.
It's great to be here.
Thanks, Tom. And my new best friend, Dean Hall, a clinician from Oregon who is a legend and has quite a story to share. Dean, a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me too, Rob. Great to finally get a chance to see you face to face.
Absolutely. You know what, gentlemen, today we're going to focus in on an event that is going to be pivotal in the wellness sector. I'm talking about May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Edison, New Jersey Exposition Center. We're talking about Abilities Expo. We're super duper excited to be there. This will be Broadway Medical's 4th year as a featured dealer. This year, we're going to be bridging a very crucial gap, the gap between what we're calling restorative, reactive wellness and our new sector that we're doing here at Broadway Medical, which is called proactive wellness.
Dean.
Yes.
How old's your dad?
He's 91. Yeah.
How's he doing?
He's doing very poorly, sadly to say, just in the last year. He was probably one of the strongest, most active, healthy men I've ever known. Mountaineer, climbed all the mountains on the West Coast, run most of the world's major marathons. But in the last year, he's lapsed into dementia and is doing very poorly. None of us saw it coming. However, we should have, because in the last 10 years, he has depended more on Western medicine as he ages. He's worked out less, become more sedentary because he was told a man his age shouldn't keep doing the things he was doing. And then he started having problems with skin cancer and high PSAs, even though he'd had his prostate out in 1998, and taken a chemo pill every day for the last 6 years. And I told him that I'm no oncologist, but that doesn't sound like any kind of cancer protocol I've ever heard of. Nor
Why is he taking the chemo pill?
His oncologist told him it was for preventative measures. And I'm like, you don't take chemo as a prevention. That's like, and this is what I told my oncologist when they pressured me when I had leukemia and lymphoma to do chemo. I said, you know, the first battle, you don't drop the atomic bomb. I consider chemo and radiation the atomic bomb. Let's save that if we've got no other choice. And
all right, we got to recap though. Your father suffers from chronic leukemia. He didn't just wander into an oncologist's office by accident.
Right.
When was his diagnosis?
His first diagnosis for CLL was 99, 2000. It was not long after he had his prostate removed for prostate cancer. And then here, over the last 15 years, he's had more and more trouble with skin cancer. And so he's just been hacked up almost monthly. And then a year ago, his oncologist talked him into doing, instead of continuing to cut on his scalp, to do radiation. And I'm like, oh, please, Dad, don't do radiation. And he did. And that's when we saw his cognitive abilities really decline.
Okay. So he's diagnosed with chronic leukemia after having his prostatectomy. And he's congratulations on him making it to 91 is an achievement, but you've seen a decline in the last 10 years. And it's hard for the audience to sort out. Are the increased treatments, the radiation, the daily chemo pill, are they because of the decline, or are they the cause of the decline? Yeah. And you have some ideas about this.
I think and some lifestyle factors, is his encouragement to be more sedentary. And then as he got more sedentary, his consumption of sugar and caffeine went through the roof. But I think it's just a terrible cocktail of lifestyle choices and then treatment.
You were also diagnosed with chronic leukemia.
I was.
And you resisted everything that your father is submitting to.
Right.
What possessed you to do the opposite of your dad?
Well, I'd like to say it wasn't young buck, old buck stuff. Maybe there was a part of that, but no,
a little mostly, bit.
Mostly it was because I had been a therapist for 20 years by then and seen hundreds of my clients come through and follow typical cancer protocols and then decline rapidly. And then even if they were successful and gone into remission, two things happened. First, they were left with lifelong neuropathy and other sorts of effects from the treatment, side effects from the treatment, but then also and more insidiously, because they'd given all their power for their treatment to a man or a woman in a white coat, when they were in remission, they were terrified of going back in, having the remission lapse and going back into cancer, because they really had no agency or responsibility for their remission. And I thought, if I get better, I want to know why. And I want to have a part in that so that if I do get better, I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder thinking, what the hell is going to happen here? Because I will have known what happened. And so that was largely it. Plus, the other thing, and this is no offense meant toward people in the medical profession, because I did end up finding just a wonderful world-class oncologist finally. But I'd also, as a therapist, served many doctors. And as I listened to their lives and their thinking and how they treated their families, their wives, their children, that white coat syndrome that my generation and the generations before me had been raised on, to put doctors up on this pedestal, was totally shattered, because as I listened to these doctors, I remember sitting there the first couple times and thinking, what the hell? I'd never do that. I'd never say that. I can't imagine thinking that way. I thought this man was smart. What? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course, I didn't say those things, but it really shattered that illusion that doctors are the guardians of the universe and of our health, and maybe even have our best intentions in mind. Yeah.
So
how old were you?
Chronic leukemia
I'm sorry, Tom.
is incurable. Your dad will have it for the rest of his life, and it sounds like the rest of his life isn't going to be very long.
Right.
But you cured yours.
Well,
what did you do?
I
not take your doctor's advice.
Yeah, I rankle a little bit by saying I cured mine. I was given a year or less to live in 2013. I was down to 158 pounds. I'm 6'1". My average, what I call fighting weight, I know that's not too politically correct, is 2'8", 210. And getting down to 158, I was skeletal.
Wow.
And I had been grieving terribly the loss of my first wife to brain cancer and feeling really sorry for myself. And I knew that if I didn't change, my 21-year-old daughter was soon to become a 21-year-old orphan and watch me die on a couch watching Wheel of Fortune or something pathetic. And so I thought, even if I die, I got to die swinging for the fence, doing something. And so that's when a lifelong dream of becoming the first person in history to swim the entire length of Oregon's longest river, the Willamette River, came back to me. And I decided to do that. This is in 2013, 2014, way before I'd ever gotten to meet you. Way before you decided you needed to find a way to build your own cold plunge. Way before I'd ever heard of Wim Hof. I didn't hear of Wim Hof. I did the swim, 187-mile swim in 2014, June. It took me 22 days. A year later, I heard about Wim Hof, and immediately I thought it was something like a Dutch blender or something, a coffee machine. I didn't know it was an actual person, and I learned a lot about him then when I did a deep dive into Google trying to find out more about him. And it was interesting how our lives had mirrored each other, and we'd accidentally come to the same conclusions. And for the people viewing that don't know my story, the Willamette's largely a snowmelt river from the glaciers in the mountains in Oregon. And so it was 40 to 45 degrees the first 16 of the 22 days. And I was swimming 10 to 12 miles a day with 2 forms of cancer. And so I was freezing my rear off. I was constantly hypothermic, sometimes to the point where it was thrombosis. I'd have to get out about every 40 minutes and run in place on the riverbank and then get in and do it again for another 45 minutes. I kept telling myself, well, this is why no one's done this. Not knowing that the first blood test after the swim, I was leukemia free. Yeah. And so
Your
that
dad-
made me a real believer in not only cold water immersion and its power, but nature's power to heal as well.
Your dad followed you in a kayak or a canoe?
He led me because in order to swim a river, you can see about 10, 15 yards or a half mile. You can't see 40 or 50 yards, which is where you need to see in order to avoid danger. And so any river swimmer and most long distance swimmers will have a kayak in front of them, and then they'll just follow the kayak. And he led me the full 22 days, which was one of our best memories. It was just quite an adventure. And he watched me get well. And here, we were sitting in the doctor's office before he had his head radiated on, and I'm begging him not to do this thing. And he's like, I've quit doing my cold plunges too. I'm like, why? And he says, well, the guy doing radiation told me they weren't good for me and that there's no real evidence that they're good for anybody. And I'm like, okay, is he a radiologist? Is he a doctor? No. How old is this guy? Oh, I don't know, maybe 20. Okay, so he's a radiation tech wearing a white coat. And it was the first time in my entire life I was fairly disrespectful to my dad because mostly he was such a strong guy, I didn't want to get my ass whooped. But
yeah, but he had it coming right here.
He
Taking
did.
advice
And I'm
from
like,
some 20-year-old listening to Lane Norton and Peter Attia on the internet. That's terrible.
Yeah, I just vomited. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, you, of all people, were there every moment of every stroke, and you saw the water heal me, and you've seen what it's done for me since. How could you, of all people, believe some kid who doesn't know crap in a white, just because he's wearing a white coat. He's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. You're stupid as blankety blank blank. And he kind of apologized, but then he went and did his radiation. And I don't think he's cold plunged since.
Now?
Yeah.
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 Who's taking care of your dad now?
What's that?
Who's taking care of your dad now?
He's living, well, mostly the family. He's living, they moved in with my sister, and we go over and take care of him to give my sister a break on Thursdays. But it's mostly my mom and my sister and my brother-in-law, and it's becoming a little much, rapidly. It's frightening how quickly his cognitive decline has been. And now, every time he's got a new symptom, they give him another pill. I counted up his medication. He's taking 23 different pills, many 2 or 3 of each at this point. And
a day?
A day.
What does a 91-year-old man with skin cancer and chronic leukemia need 23 pills a day for?
Well, he's incontinent. Sometimes he gets swelling. Duh. If you're taking that much medication, you're going to have edema. He's gotten, as is typical with dementia, he gets pretty cranky and volatile and dysregulated. And so now they've got him on an antidepressant, and they continue to raise that. And it's just crazy the amount of pills.
Are the pills working?
Oh, well, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't give you a medical diagnosis on that. But hell no. He would, I think,
none of those
be
pills.
Better off if he could quietly, thoughtfully titrate off of all of them and just live the rest of his life. 5 years ago, I begged him to just really cold plunge and let me go over to his house and juice for him every day. Because I found that was very, very helpful for my leukemia and my lymphoma. As a matter of fact, when I started juicing daily, fresh, organic, mostly greens, my oncologist within 2 months wondered why all my numbers were rapidly going in the right direction. And I said, oh, well, I've started this juicing. And he said, wow, that's better than chemo. And I said, what? And he said, nothing. And he wouldn't repeat himself. And he didn't give me permission to quote him. So. Yeah.
All right, never mind about your dad for a second. He's staying with your sister and brother-in-law and your mom. Right. How are they holding up?
It's been tough. My sister and my brother-in-law have really been doing everything they can. They organize his medication every day. They totally remodeled their house so that their whole living room and downstairs kitchen is set for them, kind of has a mother-in-law suite now. But it is just a lot. I think so, and they're not trained in grief or dementia. They're just regular folks. And to watch this man who's always been a real athlete, an adventure athlete, a strong, very smart guy, just not even be able to put his shoes on or to control his bowels or his mouth. And he's always, my folks just celebrated their 71st anniversary. And he's always adored. I never heard him say a bad word about my mom, ever. And to see him treat her poorly and even cuss at her, that's just, it's so hard to watch because it's
he's not your dad anymore.
It's so
mentally,
unusual. He's not the man any of us have known. Yeah. And he's even suicidal because he knows enough to know that he's not himself. He's in a living hell.
One of the difficult things for my mother was when she still had the self-awareness to know she was so deeply into decline that she couldn't recognize her children's faces.
Wow.
She had just enough self-awareness to know how much she had lost.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
of course it was depressing, and SSRIs weren't going to cure that either.
No. Nope.
What does your mom do? What does your sister do? What does the rest of the family do to take care of themselves?
Yeah. I've always been considered the new agey woo-woo one. And I've meditated. I started meditating an hour a day, October 2000, and have continued that practice forever. I've always worked out. My mom still goes on walks as much as she can, but it's gotten to the point where if she leaves the house, he gets really angry because he doesn't want her to leave him. So he's kind of holding her hostage. It's just scary to watch all of them spiral into this living hell. And my sister thought it would be easier because, and I even tried to talk her out of it. I said, we have other options because they've got quite a bit of money. We could have nurses in. It would be less destabilizing if they stayed in their own home. But no, she thought this was a great idea. And now she's finding out it probably wasn't, even though it was a very kind, very generous gesture. And so she and her husband are really stressed out all the time. Yeah. And
do they have practices that help them manage their stress?
They go to church. They're fairly religious, and they get support from some of those church groups. But my sister's never been physical, very active. She just had bariatric surgery. My brother-in-law is not active at all. So they're not regulating in any way that I believe is functional. Yeah.
Dean, you're in your 60s?
I'm edging towards 70. I'm 66.
You look great.
Oh, thanks.
How old your sister?
Especially from the neck down.
How old's your sister?
She just turned 60.
She wouldn't be having bariatric surgery if she weren't obese and insulin resistant. And she's 60.
Yeah.
What is she going to do so that she doesn't wind up where your father is? Exactly.
Yeah. I've tried to get her to do cold water immersion. I've tried to get her to do forest bathing. She's just not outdoorsy. There for a while, she was doing a bit of immersion. It was way up around 59 degrees. But it's something. But I don't think she's doing any of those things anymore.
This is tough for you to watch. It's tough for me to hear.
Yeah.
But there's something that you were telling me about a month or two ago. As a therapist, you understand compassion fatigue,
right,
if I'm remembering the term correctly.
You are.
It was your job as a therapist to communicate the compassion for people, even if you didn't like their choices, or even if you thought that they weren't making the progress that they should make. How did you, as a therapist, handle compassion fatigue?
Not very well, quite honestly. I think it was why I was diagnosed with leukemia the first time. I was diagnosed the first time with leukemia in 2006, 4 days before Christmas. And then all of 2007 and part of 2008, I was really, really sick. But the 10 years prior, I had been specializing in helping the sexually traumatized recover. That had been my specialty, and I feel like I was pretty good at it. Not knowing at the time there wasn't much out about secondhand trauma, and especially I was a hypnotherapist and doing many hypnotherapeutic techniques for trauma resolution, so I'd close my eyes and put myself in the story where they were as they'd recount it. And so all day long, probably 30 or more times a week for 10 years, I was witnessing molestations and rapes and incest, several times a day. And even though I was meditating and thinking I was casting that out of my body, I wasn't getting in nature enough to let it really ground and release from my body. I wasn't changing my environment enough. And I didn't know anything at that time. I believe that if I would have known about cold water at the time, I could have easily resolved that. But instead, I was getting in hot water in a tub thinking, and even though it was soothing my muscles, in a lot of ways, it was trapping those emotions. Yeah.
The hot tub feels great, but it will not work your nervous system the way the ice bath does.
Right.
And I think that's what you're referring to.
Exactly.
Will you help me with the connection between your profession and the secondhand trauma that you are experiencing and your connection to leukemia? What convinces you that the leukemia was a response to your emotional and your nervous system distress?
Yeah. When you're that stressed for that long, and I was a busy guy. I think if they would have had ADHD back in the 60s, I would have been heavily medicated. Because I've only slept my entire life. You give me 4 hours of sleep, I'm good to go. Drove my parents nuts. All through college, same thing. All the kids would study hard. I'd never crack a book until about 1 a.m. And then I'd work till about 3 a.m., then go to sleep till 8. And I would have, I didn't want to get my studies in the way of my social life, for goodness sake. And so I've always been extremely busy. And for 10 years, I was a school teacher during the day and a therapist at night. So I was working 12, 14-hour days and then all weekend. And then toward the end, the last 5 years, I was doing this sexual trauma recovery work all day, and then speaking, and I was writing an advice column every week for several newspapers around the U.S. And so I was just a really busy guy. I never really took time for self-care because, why would a guy like me need self-care? I'm strong, I'm active. I didn't know anything about nervous system regulation. I didn't know how the body absolutely needs to feel and then also release. And so I thought my meditation was giving me the release I needed, but I just didn't know enough. And especially working that hard and not sleeping. And then I lived in the Midwest, what my daughter calls the nutrition desert. We ate just nothing but fried foods and a lot of sugar. And so
seed oils and glyphosate. Yep.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, this little town would spray glyphosate all over every spring and every fall to manage the mosquitoes, right over us. And we never think anything of it. Kids would run around and get turned white and thought it was real funny. So I don't know how
glyphosate would manage mosquitoes, but I'm familiar with spraying in those agricultural towns, the herbicides and the pesticides in Kansas and in the Corn Belt. There's no way to avoid those exposures.
Right. And then also we had an oil refinery that wasn't great at managing their spills or their emissions. One time, I remember we got an alert while I was still a school teacher saying that this oil refinery had a bad emission and close all your windows, all the doors, and everybody had to stay in till 4, and they'd tell us when the cloud had passed. Well, it had been so toxic that it literally peeled the paint off of the cars on one side of the school, and this oil refinery had to repaint those cars. And everybody thought it was kind of funny, and everybody was pretty happy that they got their car repainted. None of us thought, oh my gosh, what are we living in and breathing day in and day out? And that little burg, that little area, when I left, there were only 12,000 people. And that's if you count all the dogs and cats and grandmas that may or may not be alive still. But when I left, there were 25 people in that little town that had Parkinson's. My wife died of a brain cancer. She was the 8th person in just 2 years to die of a brain cancer, a brain tumor. And there were 13 more in town that I knew had brain tumors. And then I was one of 28 people that had some form of blood cancer, just in a little town of 12,000. So, it was just a hotbed for toxins.
Yeah, we call it a cancer cluster.
Yeah.
Where there's a geographic concentration of related cases. And it warrants a hypothesis that there is some acute environmental exposure in that area. You've named several.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you decided that you wanted to do something significant with whatever was left of your life after your diagnosis, I don't think you were expecting it to cure your chronic leukemia.
Oh, furthest thing from my mind. As a matter of fact, my world-class oncologist was down at University of California, San Diego. He was considered at the time the world's number 3 researcher in CLL. He was sure it'd probably kill me. But I'm like, I'm dying anyway. So let's just do this thing. He was like, well, I can't tell you no. And so we had chemo and radiation scheduled for 2 weeks right after the swim was over, because he was positive I'd need it. And I thought I probably would too. But I thought, how many times do you get a chance to become the first person in history to do something? Even if I die, it would leave my daughter with a legacy of courage and hope. And then also I partnered with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society during their big fundraiser in June. That's why I did it in June. And I hoped that maybe I would inspire hundreds, if not thousands, of other cancer patients to refuse to be defined by their diagnosis. And so that's all I was after. That's all I was after.
You didn't go to that chemo appointment 2 weeks after you got out of the river, though.
No, I did not. I was feeling so good that I said, hey, I'm feeling good, doc. I don't think I need it. He's like, well, get a blood test. I said, okay, I will. And I thought I did, but I was looking back in my journal. I put that blood test off for months. I rescheduled it 3 or 4 times because I'm like, because any time for the last 10 years previously that I'd gone to a doctor, it had been life-threatening news. And I'm like, I'm feeling good. Just let me feel good for a little while longer before I get really bad news. And so finally, I think I put it off till January. From June, so 6 months, I went, got the blood test, and I'm down there in San Diego, and he walks in and he says, and he'd been gone an hour, and that's never good news. And I'm sitting in there sweating bullets in the treatment room. And, after a while, you can only go through their drawers and inspect their instruments so much, right? He came in, he looked down at his clipboard, looked back up at me. He's like, I don't know how to tell you this. And man, I just about lost it. I thought, I've heard that before. It was when they told me I was going to die. It was when they told me and my wife was going to die. And here we go again. And I thought, okay, well, this is why I put it off. And he looked back up, and I was just white as a sheet, probably had soiled myself too. And he's like, "Oh, Dean, I'm so sorry. I forgot what that might mean to you. What I don't know how to tell you is I can't find even a shred of your leukemia. As a matter of fact, if I hadn't diagnosed you myself, I would consider you as having been misdiagnosed." Yeah.
But
And
you
then that was
still
equally flooring because it was such overwhelmingly unexpected good news. I didn't know how to register it or process it. I walked around for 2 hours outside of the hospital. They had a nice little park in San Diego. And didn't call anyone because I thought, what does this mean? Is he right? Did I dream that up? Did I misunderstand it? I went back twice and bugged his nurse. "Now, are you sure I heard correctly?" She's like, "Yeah, Dean, you did." The first time she was real nice. The second time I was walking up, she's like, "Yeah, Dean, you did." Even
write it
before I
down.
asked the question.
But Dean,
yeah,
you still had
then,
lymphoma, and he still wanted to treat you for lymphoma.
well,
What did he say
we
about
both
that?
thought, we talked at that time that now that the leukemia was gone, my lymphoma would probably dry up and go away. But it didn't. And it got worse. And so by March, it had swollen I had over 70 lymph nodes that had swollen that we could feel. And then I had 2 or about between tennis ball and baseball size right here. And then I had what he lovingly called my hockey puck under my right arm. It was the size and shape of a hockey puck. And those had just swollen. And I was just feeling it. Lymphoma a lot of times isn't that painful, but it had gotten painful. I couldn't turn my neck, always had this arm up. And I noticed it was worsening because after a swim, the lymph system only moves when you're moving. And mine had so much toxin or toxicity in it that within 30 minutes to an hour after every time I swam, it would just flood my bloodstream with toxins and I'd be sick the rest of the day. And so it had gotten harder and harder to enjoy a good swim. And so I knew I was doing poorly, and he wanted me to do chemo and radiation. And I said, well, nature healed me once. Let me see if I can find a way for nature to heal me again. And he just rolled his eyes and, okay. And I said, no, just give me 2 weeks. If I can't find anything in 2 weeks, we'll set the chemo and radiation. So I just Googled around the clock, and I found Dr. King Lee from Nippon University in Japan, who'd done some really good research on forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku, and with men with cancer. And so it was specific to me, I felt, even though it wasn't necessarily lymphoma. And he found that just by taking them out an hour or two into the forest and being mindful and slowing down and really breathing and watching, using all your senses for just an hour or two once a week would boost their immune system anywhere from 50 to 250 times for 2 weeks. Well, that got me really excited because I thought, okay, I'm not the brightest. I'm no Tom Seager. All right. But if it boosts it for 50 to 200 times or 250 times for 2 weeks, if I go out every week and if I do not, I'm one of those American men, if a little works, a lot works better. So I thought, okay, if I go out for 24 hours and just really do my thing, maybe this would become exponential. And so I started that May of 2015. And by March of 2016, my lymphoma was resolved.
What this suggests, Dean, is that you rejected the allopathic advice. You found your own way. And as a therapist, you must feel like you have to share this with the world.
Oh, I do.
What has changed about
Everything
Tell me.
has changed. I was trained in family systems theory, in cognitive behavioral therapy, just real basic stuff all here. And at most out there relationally. I was never taught anything. Of course, there wasn't the science, at least offered at that time, or very well researched, about how we are bioenergetic, bioelectric beings on this big battery, this big, beautiful planet. And now I've coined a term in the last 6 months I call synthetic living syndrome. I've had this huge paradigm shift. I don't think the disease is here or the answer is here. I think it's out here, out becoming connected to source. And when I say source, I don't mean necessarily God, as a lot of people use it religiously. I mean this very physical, bioelectric source of energy, the planet, which all of nature effuses and emanates. And we live in such cardboard little boxes with our rubber-soled shoes in plastic environments with filtered light and temperature-controlled rooms that we are totally, especially 1 to 2 generations, disconnected from any kind of viable harmony and connection with nature. And so I've taken a lot of my 36 years now of clinical therapy and combined it with quantum biology. And I don't ask people what their symptoms are anymore. I just ask I try to ascertain how much they're connected to nature. And it doesn't have to be Dean Hall's way. It can be any way. I had a nice little 80-year-old say, Dean, I love what you do. I love working with you, but you got to know right off the bat, I'm never going hiking. I'm afraid of bears and creepy men on the trail. And I'm 84. I'm never going to jump in a cold river and swim it. And I said, but didn't you tell me you love gardening and have a nice garden in your backyard? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, that's good. Do something crazy. And she said, what's that? And I said, do you wear shoes when you garden? She's like, well, yeah. I said, don't. And I said, do you wear gardening gloves? She's like, well, yeah, I want to keep my hands pretty. I'm like, don't. She's like, what? I said, try those things for 2 weeks, and if you're not measurably better, and this woman had been on antidepressants for over 40 years, within 2 weeks, she was excited about life. Her depression and her anxiety were starting to subside, at least measurably, so she could notice it and feel it. But within 6 months, she was titrating off of her. She's like, I feel kind of odd, but I want to go talk to my doctor. I don't think I need to be on these pills anymore. I'm like, you don't. And she said, could it really be that easy? And I'm like, yeah, we're making it way too complicated.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I've developed now something called BioWild psychology. And it has certain tenets that I think are very sound, very stable, easily repeatable, almost universal. And it's start with the source. Are you plugging into the planet and getting recharged? Most of us, we treat our cell phones better than we do ourselves. Everybody I know plugs in their cell phone every night because they want it to work efficiently the next day. Yeah. We expect ourselves to work efficiently, but we never plug ourselves in to the planet and get recharged and get that necessary biological, psychological release that nature gives us, that cold water instantly gives us. And so that's the first thing. And then I work with them to explore what their source is or their treatment modality is, because everybody's different. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you enjoy it, you'll do it, and it's connected to some form of nature. And then most treatment modalities are aimed at average. Okay, if the person is no longer depressed, they're not happy, but they're not sad, then they're done with therapy. Well, that's a
Wow.
terrible, that's a terrible outcome. That'd be like, a personal trainer saying, well, you're not fat anymore. See ya. Okay, and some people would be happy with that, maybe, but most personal trainers want you to get some muscle tone, want you to get in cardiovascular shape. It's just silly. It'd be like a car manufacturer saying, oh, you wanted a Porsche, you're paying for a Porsche, but we're going to give you a used car because it's average. It just doesn't make sense. And so I started asking and meditating, what would nature do? What is the outcome? Well, it's all over. Especially now that it's beginning to be spring, we see it. Things bud, things start to flower, things start to bloom, things start to bear fruit. And so that's the outcome for my therapeutic approach. When a person starts to flourish and there's an excess that they have to give to others, they probably have done the work they need to do. And then the thing that I'm finding that's really fun for me as a therapist and coach is once a person kind of learns their way and what works for them, I think it always will. I think it's sustainable lifelong. So that's just breaking BioWild psychology down into its of course, I've got what I call BioWild power codes. And I started asking, because almost everything in psychology is a step process or a stair process, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Even Stephen Porges, who I just love his work in polyvagal theory, he uses the ladder. I use the spiral because I believe our nervous system is this living, breathing thing. And we're treating it like an inanimate object. And it's more like a mimosa plant. You get close or touch a mimosa plant, it'll curl in on itself. And you walk away from it, it opens up. Here where I'm at, close to the seashore, you poke your finger in a sea anemone, closes up. After a while, it opens back up. And that's what your nervous system will do. It's highly reactive, like your pupil is. You walk into bright sunlight, your pupil shrinks. You walk into the dark, it opens up. We're taking too much responsibility and credit for our nervous systems, and we're giving it to our intellect or our consciousness. And that's silly, and it sets us up for feeling weak and pretty much powerless and ashamed even. If we know, once you realize it's this living, breathing thing that spirals and opens and closes several times a day, then you find out what to do when it closes and how to open it back up. And then you start gaining mastery over your own nervous system. And it's really not that hard to do once you look at it as a living, breathing, viable part of life rather than just this stuck entity that you got to have the right mindset for.
Wow, these are just
you and
little
I
changes.
are going to be at the Abilities Expo in New Jersey. And that's coming up in a month.
Right, yeah.
The expo is going to have people who are physical therapists, osteopathic doctors, caregivers, clinicians. They're also going to have family members like your sister and your mother who are caring for people who have lost a lot of their abilities. Sometimes it'll be a parent who has a child that needs a lot of care. And suppose that they hear us on the stage and we're sort of reprising this story. And unlike your sister, they're ready to try some of the things that you're advocating for. What would they do, Dean?
Yeah, I've got all sorts of things. I got really excited this last week because over the last year and a half, I've been writing a book called Nervous System First Aid. Quick, easy self-calming strategies that you can do almost anywhere. I've got over 50 of them in this book. I have been rewriting it with you and us in mind, taking a lot of the science jargon and the psychology jargon out, because I say it's nervous system first aid. And when you open up a first aid kit, you don't read about the body. You just grab something to help stop the bleeding. And so I've made it very, very much more simple so that people can relate to it and grab things very quickly. And I'm hoping to introduce at least one or maybe two of those real quick nervous system resets. I even thought about something I've used, and this was another Dean Hall back into it unexpectedly kind of thing. There's a guy named Dr. Robert Gerzon who wrote a book in 2005 or so called Finding Serenity in the Age of Anxiety. And he ran a study several times of what he called micro meditation. He found that if he could get people to do what he called breathe through their anxiety center for 1 to 3 minutes, 5 to 7 times a day, within 3 months, they were having the same therapeutic outcomes that guys like me have who meditate for an hour or more. Well, back then, even anybody that taught meditation laughed at him. They thought that's the silliest. There's no way that could. But he repeated that study several times. Well, I would offer this to my clients, especially the busy ones, the ones who had compassion fatigue, the caregivers, the executives, and the professionals that were tired, especially in the healthcare community. And they'd think it was a great idea and maybe would do it once or twice, but they were so busy or so overwhelmed they couldn't find a way to do it. Well, I was working with this one lady I just adored. I'll call her Agnes. And Agnes she was about 55 years old, going through menopause or post-menopause. And we're right in the middle of the session. And this was, of course, before COVID. And so we were together in my office. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, Dean, I'm so sorry. Can I go to the bathroom?" I'm like, "It's your time. If you need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom." And so she went and she came back and she was very apologetic. But in the time she was gone, I thought, you know what? She's not doing anything out of her norm, and she's not taking any extra time for the breathing through. So I said, "Agnes," I said, "What were you doing when you went to the bathroom?" She's like, "Dean, that's kind of an odd question." I said, "No, there's a point. Stay with me." I said, "You were peeing. Were you looking at your phone? Were you just thinking about your stress?" She's like, "I was doing both." She's like, "I was looking at my phone because I was so stressed out." I said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run a 2-week trial run. Every time you go," I said, "How many times a day are you going to the bathroom?" She's like, "Oh my gosh, with menopause, I'm going 7 to 12 times a day." I said, "Great. All you need is 3 to 5, according to Gerzon, remember?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." And so she called them toilet meditations. I've decided to call them bathroom breaks because that's what we used to say anyway back in the 70s. "Hey, I'm going to go take a bathroom break." And I've started teaching people with compassion fatigue, especially. I taught my sister this, as a matter of fact, and she reported that it's helped. So I should have mentioned that. But what I have them do is just anytime they go to the bathroom, and men, I tell men, for once, solve the lid up, lid down problem. Just sit down. It'll make your wife happy. And when you sit down, just put your hand on your heart or any place you're feeling that tension, and notice, first do a body scan, go from the tips of your toes, top to your head, notice where you're the most tightened up, then put your hand there and just imagine, rather than breathing out in and out through your nose or mouth, you're breathing in and out through that. You don't even have to add any imagery to it, according to Gerzon. A lot of times people do, they'll imagine they're breathing out, toxic gas, breathing in beautiful golden light or something. And just do that every time you pee. And then when you're done going to the bathroom, stop. But make it a consistent, and it won't take any time from all the other things you have to do. And so I thought at this Abilities Expo, I'll teach them that. Or I've also developed what I call the Earth Sky Reset. We know now from Huberman and others that if you gaze toward the horizon or up into the sky and see the light first thing, it really helps reset your nervous system. But he doesn't go far enough. He doesn't teach us that if you look a long way off, it reorients your body in time and place. And that's really important to keep your nervous system calibrated. And so, and then also if you really feel your weight on your feet, it helps to orient you in place and time. And that's one of the reasons so many of us are not settled and have nervous system dysregulation, because the first thing we do is we look at our phones. Well, that makes us a spectator, which a lot of people don't know. When you're a spectator, you're not in your body. You've floated off somewhere else into the ether or into the world. And so I'm now having people go out first thing, stand on their back porch or patio or deck, really feel their feet, and just say, I feel this. Feet on the ground, earth to the sky, hand on the heart. And then they just breathe. Amazing. And then I just have them say a couple other things. One of the things I like them to say is, life moves through me. I move through life. Thank you for this day. And it only takes 20 seconds. And there's a lot of science around it, but it really gives them a strong position to move forward. And then I've had caregivers go out and do that several times a day, anytime it's too much. And they're finding, even though it's extraordinarily simple, it takes them from a 9 or 10 in compassion, fatigue, and stress quickly, at least down to a 6, if not a 4 or a 3. Well, you can live with a 3. Yeah, you can breathe with a 3. You can't with an 8 or a 9. Yeah, and so I'm hoping to introduce some of those ideas to these stressed out caregivers, because it's something immediate that they can do anytime, even though they're just overwhelmed and have no time to themselves. Yeah.
Rob, is this going to be of interest to the attendees at the Abilities Expo?
I sit here and I listen to Dean speak, and the clientele that come through there, and the caregivers and the family members, they're just at their wits' end, and it's sad. And part of the reason why I undertook this to bring in the best is because they're not finding solutions any other way. We need to find a better solution. And I couldn't think of two people more that could possibly bring the right answers or the right solutions or just a different way of looking at it. And absolutely, Tom, I can't wait. I can't wait till people get a chance to hear the two of you, and we touch a lot of lives.
Yeah, I can't wait either.
All right, gentlemen.
Just to
it's going to be here before you know it.
The stage with Tom is a big deal for me. But then also, I'm getting feedback.
No, go ahead.
But also to teach just a couple little things and kind of pique their curiosity, and then also let them know that if you do these things just by stepping outside, or maybe finding a way to get one little window of time where you go out to a river or the ocean or a forest or the desert, wherever you may be living, and really take time to connect with the earth, that's a game changer. That's a game changer.
Tom, what would you add to
This has
this?
been a pleasure. I don't think there's anything to add at this point. We've been prompting Dean for about an hour, and something that I haven't heard you do in the past, but you did today, was talk about some of the patience that you have. My goodness, we're not all going to swim the Willamette River, Dean, and we don't all have leukemia. But when you're telling me about some of your older patients, especially, who took off their shoes and got into the muddy, soil of the garden so they could ground themselves to the earth and draw those electrons out, and how much a difference that make, I think that's terrific.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
I've got
simple.
hundreds of those stories. And I'm glad it was meaningful. I'd be glad to tell more of them anytime you want me to. It's so exciting for me as a clinician to see that healing doesn't have to be hard work. When I was a kid, I only had one question. Well, no, two. First one was why, which my parents hated because that was... And it wasn't just when they told me to do something. It was whenever they mentioned a fact. I was curious. I wanted to know why. Second one is, how can we have more fun? How can we do X and have more fun? And what I'm finding is BioWild psychology and everything that's coming with the latest research on quantum biology is it's giving us the whys that have always been a big question mark over my head as a clinician. But then secondly, the thing that's got me really excited is people are having fun. Healing isn't so mysterious and such hard work. All they have to go and do is find a way to connect with nature in a way they like, at a time they enjoy, in a place they relate to, and have fun. And then they get better. Yeah, that's
a little
exciting.
thing.
And to me, that's
I'm in favor
sadly
of fun.
revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds good.
Thank you very much for your time. Again, the Abilities Expo, May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at the New Jersey Exposition Center, Edison, New Jersey. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.